welcome to Frankly Speaking with Sendra D, where we dive deeply and help you wake up to the essence of what it means to live a real, authentic, affluent life. Beyond the balance sheets, the bank accounts, the private jets, the political offices, into the realm of inner wealth and personal power. I'm Sendra D, your companion guide on this trajectory of truthful self-mastery as we celebrate your individuality and your sovereignty. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another fantastic episode of Frankly Speaking with Sendra D. My name is Sendra D. I am your host. By now, you actually know all about me. I know you come to this channel or to this podcast to learn more about the guests. Today, I have Mr. Thomas Roell, who is based in Frankfurt, Germany. You know, I try to take you all around the world, all around the globe. I mean, for me, it's wishful thinking. I don't travel as much as I used to, but Mr. Roell is based in Frankfurt, Germany. Like myself, he has a background in finance. He is the founder and managing director of piHub, which is a private debt, loan, real estate infrastructure facilitator, which means that, like myself, we usually are third parties. I'm an investor, but for the most part, a significant portion of my responsibilities on a daily basis is to facilitate transactions, capital injections into projects and assets. So welcome to this podcast. Thomas, how are you today?
Thank you. I'm great. Nice to meet you and happy to be part of your postcard series.
Yes. Well, we have met before, but nice to see you today. I know it's a language barrier, but I didn't give much of a background. Would you like to tell the audience, what was your journey like? Because on a personal note, to me, I know you are Jewish and you were born in Germany. Of course, everyone must know the history of Germany. And of course, you know, what transpired in the early 1900s. But can you start there and also get us to your financial background, how you got to be the founder and managing director of piHub?
Sure, happy to run you quickly through my bio. So my background is in banking. I used to work in financial markets for over 20 years before I founded my company. Most of the time I spent at Dresdner Kleinwort Benson and Commerzbank, where I used to build several businesses out of the capital markets division. At some point, I felt that this entrepreneurial spirit that I feel inside of me is not something I can work very well with in the banking environment after financial crisis, increased regulation for banks that have diversified business models. I founded piHub in 2016 together with a partner, Serge de Molière, who at that time left the board of managing directors of a large bank, Landesbank Berlin, and we developed the company into what it is today. Over time, we literally started more with an advisory approach, which we then figured to develop better into a platform for lending products, which at the beginning was very much corporate driven. But then through COVID, the focus of the company changed more into infrastructure and real estate, which was also driven by the development in the market that corporates were very much served with government money in order to go through the crisis. And investors invested pretty much into infrastructure and real estate, which we found that we can be a support with our technological platform, but also with the background that we have in banking. Academically, I graduated from Frankfurt School of Finance, which is an international university here based in Frankfurt. And later I pursued my MBA at Kellogg Northwestern, Evanston, Chicago in a joint program with the German university, which also helped me to foster more my entrepreneurial spirit and helped me also into some way to build my business and to do that step in my life. Yeah. Privately, I'm married to my wonderful wife, who's Belgian American. And so that's probably in a nutshell the best about me.
That's fantastic. Do you have any children?
Not yet.
Okay, fantastic. So I could see why you would marry an American, because I think deep inside, once you get that, the, what do you call it? American pioneering fever, you just want to be an entrepreneur. I know for myself, I was born in Haiti and my mother was an entrepreneur, but I always felt that there was something deep in, first of all, I don't like authority. Let's start there. I don't like anyone telling me what to do. So I think that's the first step in recognizing I don't think I'm built for corporate America, because of course there's always a hierarchy unless you are the president and the chairman or the bank. But nothing against these corporate structures. They serve a purpose. But I knew for me, even though I had a long career, I, like you, felt that I was led to be for me, that's also a way to define freedom for me. So I fully appreciate that. So let's touch a little bit about Germany and what's going on in Germany. So as I mentioned, because I tried to touch on a bit of historical data, which is your background being Jewish, but we're going to put that aside. Maybe we'll do another podcast another time to get more on the personal, what your thoughts are about the cultural mix that Germany has now. But let's focus on, because this audience is really data driven. They love to talk about the quantitative nature of the future. And so give us currently what the current state of the German economy is, because we know there was a big event, that was tied to the Ukraine conflict, because there was the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that was destroyed. So that was a big event. It seems like it's been pushed aside. No one's talking about it anymore. It's like move forward. But that was a significant, how can I say, dent in the Russian economy, because now your cost of energy has increased significantly. So let's talk about the current state of affairs.
Oh, well, when we look at the energy side, I would say this is very much driven by politics. Yeah. So under the Chancellor Angela Merkel, Germany made a large energy shift into a high dependency on Russian gas. And at the same time, with the event in Japan, I think 2012, Germany decided to stop using nuclear power plants as a source of energy. Meanwhile, the energy prices are amongst the highest in the world, definitely in Europe. And with the government that followed Angela Merkel, which is very much dominated by the Green and the Social Democrat, which is meanwhile a relatively far left party, we see that which is economically to a certain extent right, to rely on more alternative energy sources like wind and solar energy. But there has never been a proper plan in place how this transformation can go smoothly. It was just more driven by ideology rather than economic considerations.
Or common sense.
Or common sense, you say it. So that today, the German economy is suffering very much from high energy prices on one side. And then in addition, from the cost of this transformation, which is an ideological transformation, which reminds me to a certain extent to the economic transformation that Stalin did in the 1930s in Russia. And we all know how this failed. So in a historical context, or looking at similar approaches from governments in history, we can see that at least for now, with nuclear power plants, without having a proper plan in place, how this transformation should serve the people, this is a big burden on the German economy. And this is just the energy side. There's also the Green Deal of the EU. In addition, there is the transformation of traffic systems, like getting rid of cars with fuel versus cars driving with electricity. This is a very big burden. At the same time, also to add to this, we can see that one of the strongest drivers of the German economy, the infrastructure, has been deteriorated significantly over the past, let's say, 10, 15 years. So the traditional strength of the German economy in cars, in chemistry, and also Siemens was one of the providers of the most secure nuclear power plants worldwide. Yeah.
Correct.
And I could talk over hours over
You can talk
this
hours.
because
As you can tell, I'm your greatest student right now. I'm absorbing your information. Feel free.
Germany imports utilities from France, from the Czech Republic, from the nuclear power plant there. So this is all insane and is putting a high burden on the traditional German economy. I don't see that as long as this is supported and pursued further from a political side. On top, also the EU is following this policy. I don't see a bright future German economy.
My heart is breaking as you say that. As you say, you're not optimistic about so we'll leave the summary of the sort of the little last bit of pessimism, but I want you to talk to the audience step by step, which we know that the automotive industry in Germany has been a leader globally. Recently, Donald Trump said that when he went to Germany, he was upset that he didn't see one single American cars on the street. So if he gets elected, I mean, already there's a dent in productivity in the automotive industry in Germany, right? So if Donald Trump gets elected, he's going to reduce American consumption and expect the German consumption of American automobiles to increase. I don't know. I just don't see American cars on the street of Europe. I don't know. It does something, but talk to me about that, because that is, in my opinion, that was your strongest industry besides the energy. You were the leaders. And first of all, in luxury cars and just reliable cars. So tell us how you see that particular sector of industry. What is it now and how do you see it moving forward?
Having sounded probably pretty pessimistic, there's also there has been in the past, a huge innovation spirit in German industries. Yeah. And the German industries always were able to adapt to change in global politics. I mean, so I've been selling many cars to China, to India, to the Middle East. But looking forward, what scares me is the political influence that is becoming bigger and bigger into the economy. And I think today politicians are not very savvy in how to develop economy and how to serve the country, because there's a lot of conflict of interest, etc., etc. But going forward, I hope that this innovation spirit, that this spark will become bigger again. And I think that there is a chance one way or the other. However, as of today, I'm not very optimistic that the major problems the country has are addressed sufficiently by the politicians. There is economical part, which we just touched. There is also in social politics, there's a lot of very expensive immigration. Yeah.
That's definitely significant right now,
which is not being solved. And I think putting these challenges together, it needs a huge effort. And in every developed country in the world, the US, Canada, Europe, they see a lot of immigration that is not, let's say, increasing, or which doesn't support necessarily the economy, because they're not necessarily skilled work that comes to those countries. It's a lot of people that need support in order to live their lives. And this is all on a very high level, and we'll have to see how these future elections may change the activities of politicians. I don't know whether it's good or bad. More right-wing parties enter into government, but I see a lot of responsibility from politicians to address the problems that are manifested in these countries.
So thank you for that. And so for me, I have very strong opinions about politicians. The audience knows that I grew up in a quasi-political. My father was more of a military man and diplomat, but in Haiti, such a small country that it's sort of morphs into one system.
Yeah.
So I look at, when I was in London when Mrs. Merkel was beginning her open door policies, and she was like, come on in. And I was like, that's not a good idea. See, the thing is, I always grew up, as I said, with people who are very smart. The leaders of my family, the patriarchs of my family, all very smart, overeducated. So I thought everyone was that way. And they had a lot of common sense. And they were also very religious and spiritual, which I think is what is lacking right now in a common leader. Because when you have that sense of spirituality or something greater than you, you're serving, you're not grabbing. So when I heard Angela Merkel open door policy, come on in. And I said, are you asking the people if they want this? You can't just make a decision without checking in with the people you serve, but also the people who are going to be impacted the most by this, right? So talk to me about, because we're talking about immigration, and, this show is called Frankly Speaking with Sendra D. This is where I give myself permission to say things that I probably wouldn't say average walking down the street. So feel free, your honest opinion as to do you remember that moment? I think it was around 2007, 2008, this all happened, right? This was 2015. Yeah, it was 2015. So 2008 was the global crisis. In 2015, when she started opening the doors, and she said it with such a smile that it was hard for you to say no. I, for one, loved Angela Merkel because she was like the epitome of strength and leadership in a woman. And then you add, and I said at some point, if we had these three women in power at the same time, Angela Merkel, then Theresa May came into office, and then, of course, Hillary Clinton was also running for office, and now I heard she's rumored to be coming back. But anyway, this is when I made a decision to stop putting gender on politics, because Boris Johnson said if a woman was in office, there would be no wars. I want to remind him that Margaret Thatcher was one of the biggest warmongers on the planet. She had no problem, the Falklands. She had no problem going to war. So let's put gender aside, because I think it's distracting when we start saying this woman, it's a woman, she wouldn't do this. I think some of the worst leaders, not because they're not talented and educated, but because they lack common sense, and they are, I think, narcissistic and self-absorbed. So I'm glad I got that off my chest. But I would like you to tell me the leadership of Angela Merkel is really what started Germany on this path of self-destruction, and also Germany. And then let's just not forget that she was leading the EU. So it wasn't just Germany that she was leading down this path of destruction, because it was under her watch, wasn't it, that Greece failed and all these Southern European countries started just collapsing. So talk to me about that. Why would the German people allow that? Because I could see what's happening now on the American landscape, the self-destructive behavior. Did you, because you're in finance and you could read the tea leaves to say, well, this is, and I just want to add that famous line. I think it was Einstein who said, insanity is repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. You touched on Russia and what Stalin did, and where you seeing the same type of strategies in common in everyday practices. You've got to know that these people are well read to know what happened in history. That they're seeing this, they're implementing the same type of strategy. So talk to me about that. I know I put a lot out there, but pick one, just pick one.
Yeah. So to be very fair, I think, to Mrs. Merkel, is that what happened in 2015, there was probably not another choice than to open the borders, because what we saw is that there was this huge track of refugees on the borders of Austria, going back to the Balkan countries. And also, again, reading history, in the First World War started in the Balkan, and the Balkan has ever since seen several conflicts, because there are so many different types of people, different races. And at that time was close to explode. So I think it was the right decision to open the borders. However, the aftermath after opening the borders, that was managed so badly. Once you bring people into a country from foreign cultures, you have to make sure that they understand that they are in a different environment, that they face different cultures, and that they either have to accept this as a refugee in need, or if you are not able to deal with this, then you go back to where you come from. And if you like that place better than where you are now, then go back. There was, I forgot who said it, but there was a German politician, I think it was a German politician. He said, if you want to help Calcutta here, you make this Calcutta and not the other way around, right? So this is kind of the problem that happened. And then instead of making this kind of immigration unattractive, it has been made, especially with a government that followed Angela Merkel, has been even made more attractive to come here. You have in Germany, you have this so-called Bürgergeld, which is an allowance you get from the government every month.
It's welfare.
It's welfare, but it's more money than, let's say, the average carpenter.
That is upsetting me so much as I'm trying to be really diplomatic. I'm channeling my family's diplomatic, background so I can smile, but I'm really appalled by what I'm hearing you say right now.
You can easily prove this with numbers. It's not populism. It's just like you see the facts, you see the numbers, and you see, let's say, a refugee family or even a German family not working, 2 kids, they have a better life in terms of their financial situation than, let's say, the average carpenter who has a wife and 2 kids and has to bring up his kids. So I think in the long run, this is very dangerous. And I believe that most likely any new government would change the situation very quickly. But what we started with was Mrs. Merkel, and I think it was fair at the time, but how it has been managed ever since by every government ever since is just outrageous. And it's very difficult to explain to people. And the result is that people go to vote more radical parties because they believe that they would solve the problem.
Absolutely. And you know what? First of all, it's not sustainable because, these people are not doing their projections properly. Just like any business, and you're a founder, I'm a founder, you have to do your pro forma to recognize where you can have some flexibility and where you don't have flexibility. It seems that in the case of Germany and this open door policy, the only vision they had is to feel good when they go to sleep at night. They were like, well, I'm just going to do everything I can as long as my mind is at rest at night and I'm doing good. So if I say to these politicians, if you want to be a humanitarian or philanthropist, resign and go open a nonprofit organization, because when you're in politics, when you're a civil servant, you're being paid by stakeholders, which happen to be citizens of your country, not non-citizens, citizens of your country. If you want to implement some kind of policy, put it to the people, create something, what do you call it? A vote, put a vote, just like with Brexit, right? Anything can be put to a vote and let the people decide. And you see how hard the UK is fighting even the Brexit situation. And I think the Brexit situation started with this whole EU policy to just let them come in. So, and now we have the same issue in the United States. People say my situation was different because my father was a diplomat here in the United States, and I was already in college. So my parents applied for me to have a green card because I was already of age. And then I worked and then I became a citizen, but I did everything to the legal channel. I did not. People are going to say you never know what it feels like to suffer in a country. I mean, I had some family members that were not as prominent as my parents. So I've seen what it can be to have hardship. I may not have been impacted by it, but you know what? Everyone has a choice. Do you come to this country to acculturate yourself? Or do you want to maintain your culture, at any cost because you refuse? First of all, a lot of the people that come under duress hate the country they're in. They hate Germany, they hate Europe, they hate the United States. They blame them for there's some little blame to add to that, but if you're going to coexist with people from that country, have a bit more respect for the help that you're getting, or go back. Just go back. And I say the same thing to Haitian from my country. If you don't like the United States, go back. So one of the things I want to bring out to you, and I know I see you, this was not even the plan. We talk about immigration as a bill, but my issue is Olaf Scholz has no leadership qualities, none. He should be gone. Olaf Scholz can't stand up to anything as a leader. And I did a podcast, and my second episode was about mindful leadership. It's about examining the situation. Sometimes you have to make a decision to decide whether or not you are not the right person to lead in that time. So sometimes you have to step aside and let someone else take over. And I don't feel that. I think Germany right now needs a very strong leader. So what do you think ties these two, the politics of of Germany with the economy of Germany? And how can we bridge these two to guarantee a successful future, sustainable for the German people?
Honestly, a very difficult question, because I think once you compare, let's say, Europe or especially Germany with the US, there's a completely different mindset or setting how politics and economy is intertwined or not intertwined. So in the US, you have a system where someone from economy easily can go into politics and the other way around. And Trump is probably the most prominent example of that. And at the same time, the impact of politics into the economy is relatively limited. So entrepreneurship is very free in the US. Of course, you have regulation and this and that, but the politics does not so much impact the success of economies, of entrepreneurs, etc. In Germany, it's literally the other way around. Mm-hmm. So it happens almost never that someone from the economy goes into politics or the other way around. But at the same time, politics and economy is very much intertwined, because it's a much more, now, I have to be very careful with terminology here, but mm-hmm. it's much more on the spectrum of the socialist economy, mm-hmm. than a capitalist economy. And so politics and economy is pretty much intertwined. And in order to have more success economically in the future and to get out of this current situation, politics should step much further away from economy. And this is a very difficult process because you have to take away power from much less economically educated people, and that's very difficult. So I am not in a situation where I can solve this, but if I would have to solve this, you would have to give much more freedom to entrepreneurs. You would have to reduce regulation significantly. Yeah. And this applies to many industries, especially the industry we're pretty close to because of our business model in real estate and construction. You have so much regulation that construction activity currently is very, very low. And this is mainly because of cost of regulation. Of course, we had the rise in interest rates recently. We had rise in construction costs and in raw materials and commodities, which was a shock. like 1.5, 2 years ago because of the short time frame it happened. And we see that one of the major cost drivers is regulation. And to give you just one example, in order to reach the highest energy efficiency in Germany, the walls of the building need to be, I think, 4 times better isolated than in the Netherlands, which means you could easily have an effect on the housing market as soon as you reduce regulation. But the question is, are the politicians willing to do so? Yeah. Or do they understand the problem and
They don't
can they
understand.
solve the problem? They probably don't even understand the problem.
They're all ideologues. They
Yeah.
all have a big, like, elephant in the room, and they're so captivated by that whole, it's their new religion. Whether it's going to be climate change or immigration, at all costs, nothing else matters except what they have in their target.
They solve other problems. They solve problems of, I don't want to go into this, but just regulation. As an example, in the city of Cologne, they have spent, I don't know how many millions in establishing public gender neutral toilets, just to see the priority of problems that politicians deal with today.
Europe is going to be kicked out of Africa. Africa is like, no, we're not having any of this because we have hungry children to feed. And you want to talk about climate change and you want to talk about gender this and gender that. So, and they're very religious. So they're going to have a rude awakening because not everyone's on board with this. It's the same what happened in Haiti. I think it was last year. The American embassy decided it would be a great idea in a very Catholic country. Haiti is very Catholic, for Pride Month to raise the Pride flag. Haitians, you know what Haitian counter? It's like playing a poker game. Well, you raise me a Pride flag, I'm going to raise you a China flag and a Russia flag. So they went in front of the American embassy and they were floating around, waving the Chinese and Russian flag. So, it's all become a joke now because people these politicians, first of all, they're not qualified. Have you noticed the trend of unqualified individuals calling themselves leaders, even in American politics? And I go back to the women leadership. I was appalled I would think it was 3 weeks ago. Women were talking about eyelashes and hair and body. It was just a disgrace. So I get distracted a lot of time because when you see yourself who is an able thinking individual, human, and capable of rational, logical thought, but then you see this is the best we have among us. This is the best. So we're talking about regulation now. So what are the key regulatory issues that startups, because I know Germany has a phenomenal startup sector. So what are the key challenges at this point, besides just funding? So we're talking about regulation and government interference, because really that's going to help you counterbalance the destruction of other sectors. We talked about real estate a bit down now, but another thing, so the startup, but funding is another one, because now with interest rates going up, but it's not only that, there were so many banks and, I shouldn't say many banks, but there was at least one significant bank that was collapsing. And what needs to change in order for the startup sector to be a bit more solid to support the German economy?
So first of all, and coming back to this innovative spirit that is there, it's kind of amazing how the startup ecosystem evolved over the past, let's say, 10 to 15 years in Germany, despite the challenges that need to be tackled by politics. So again, the regulation, and once we talk about regulation, it's more like the administrative process that takes a lot of time until you can set up a business. Yeah. It takes.
What's the time frame? You say a lot of time. Can you give me a number?
Can be 3 to 5 months from the day you register and until you are operational.
Really?
And this has gotten worse over COVID because of the process in the administrative offices. And depending on which industry you're in, we provide financial services. So we need financial service regulation, and there are several levels. And depending on which one you need for the business you have. It's again a time frame that can be 3 to 6 months. And if you need a BaFin regulation, which is similar to SEC, it can be even 6 to 12 months, depending on what kind of regulation you need. If you look into biotech industry or medical devices, you also have a lot of regulation. Or, for example, if you provide some, let's say, data security services, you have a different regulation, and all these big offices have different lead times, and it depends pretty much on the business you're in or on the sector. But that is something I think that certainly needs to be worked on, because that also, and you mentioned raise of capital, that of course also delays a capital raise process. And so in or crypto, which I'm very far from, but it's also again, like for quite a long time, the financial supervisory authority didn't know to what extent are we responsible, to what extent are we not. And so many of these businesses, when we speak about Europe, have been founded in countries like Switzerland or the Channel Islands of the UK. And so it's more like also flexibility in those who decide. And there's a lot that can be done. And again, earlier about the relationship between government and the economy. So the government has set up a fund of, I don't know, like 3-digit million number to invest into startups, which I think is the wrong way.
How much is it? How much is the fund?
I think it's a 3-digit million number. Let's say something like around 500 million, which can grow up to billions. But again, it's not, in my opinion, it's not the government who should do that, because it should be left to the entrepreneurs to raise money in the capital market rather than from a government, because it's an impact into the economy that should be self-regulated by the economy itself. Because let's say if I have to go to government, I'm not sure if this is the right way to support entrepreneurs, because I have to also at a later point in time make sure that my product finds enough customers, and I better convince a VC rather than a government that what I'm doing is right. And I think the government at the end of the day will waste money.
Of course they do. They waste money because they have their eye on the prize. They want to take Russian assets. That's the best idea I've heard so far. Isn't that a wonderful? We can bankrupt ourselves, but there's a neighbor. We can take their money and we could just write blank checks based on Russian assets that we have. But you know what? Washington's getting smart because they recently closed 2 German banks in Russia. You know, I don't think, and I'm not defending the Russian. And of course, people will say, well, it's Vladimir Putin. Well, you know what? I've never met Vladimir Putin. I don't know the man. I just know what I hear, what he does. And like, again, we go back to, you raise your pride flag, I will raise the Russian flag. Whatever, it's tit for tat. If someone does something, of course, you're going to retaliate in some form. But Russia was an ally of Germany. Angela Merkel, who was it? Didn't Putin go to some wedding in Germany where he was dancing? Was it Austria or Germany?
It was Austria.
Was it Austria? But anyway, he was really friendly with Europeans, where he could fly and dance with the bride. I mean, come on. Instead of overnight, he had a change where he wants to invade and take over. I'm not one of those who believes that Vladimir Putin is interested in taking over the world, because they are not stopping at Europe. They're saying he just wants to be the dictator of the world. And you know what? The way Haiti is going right now, I would say, Mr. Putin, feel free, because whoever's in charge of Haiti right now, they're not doing such a good job. Let's fire them, like Donald Trump always says. Fired. You're fired. Whoever's down there, and it's a core group. But we're not talking about Haiti right now. But we're going back to that blank check that Germany has when it comes to funding, immigration, refugees, where it comes to funding startups and bailing out banks as well, because that's on the horizon, because these banks don't pass their stress test And then, because they know that no matter what, they're too big to fail, they're never going to go down. I think it's time we start teaching these large bank and institution that they are not too big to fail. So what do you think about that?
I think there are several aspects, and I try to sum my ideas up quite shortly, because on one side, banks or all these companies should not become too big to fail. And for that, we have antitrust regulation, etc. So they should take care of this. But then once it happens, they should go and be able to fail. Yeah, because the government is not there to save those companies that are managed badly, that made bad decisions. We don't know the extent of how these decisions have been made or why these decisions have been made. They just made a wrong decision, so let them fail, whether it's a bank or whatever. I think the problem at the time with Lehman Brothers that caused this financial crisis was more like that before there have been made a lot of mistakes by antitrust regulations, by regulators, etc. So once you are able to manage via antitrust regulation, etc., that those companies do not become too big, then you can let them fail. If you let them go so big that they can bring down a whole economy,
The whole house of cards.
the whole house of cards, then there's a problem in the system. And I would always argue that it's not the companies that have failed, it's the governments and the
Correct.
regulators that have failed beforehand.
Absolutely. You know, that just reminds me when you talk about Lehman Brothers. So Hank Paulson, if you remember, was the Treasury Secretary at the time. I mean, I have no problem. They say the good old boys club. Well, men are going to hang out with men. I mean, you know, women are going to hang out with women. I mean, most of my friends are male anyway, but they're for the most part, you know, and in the societal structure that we live in, men spend time with them. So there is a network of men that operate together. Hank Paulson came from Wall Street. He was CEO of Goldman Sachs at some point. Of course, he's going to know these people. So there's a conflict there. There is a clear conflict of interest there because he's never going to watch his old friends or, you know, he's not going to be able to do that kind of job. And I'm not targeting or focusing so much on Hank Paulson. He just happened to be in the role at that time.
Yeah, sure.
So when you talk about we need to let them fail, well, he's someone like Hank Paulson who comes from that pool. And now imagine Jamie Dimon Trump says, oh, I might consider Jamie Dimon to be my next Treasury Secretary. Really? Donald? Really? That's your best idea and I support you. But I have to say, I'm sorry, please call me, please. Because this is just a pattern again, insanity, repeating the same thing again. And just, you know, you get the same result because we've seen a trend. Banks are failing. They've been failing again since 2023. And Jamie Dimon has been bailing out Republic. Tell me what other banks. So tell me, what can we do? Who is your ideal regulator and who would be impartial? I'm a mediator, impartial, someone who comes in and says, I've not been to this side. I've not been to this side. I'm completely neutral. I serve the people that of the country where I am hired for. What kind of person would that be? Because most of them come from the banking industry.
Yeah, I can just hope that Jamie Dimon is as smart as I believe he is and reject that offer.
Well, he may be smart, but he might have a little hubris. You never know. That's also what, you know, usually captures these individuals. But yeah, anyone else? Who would you think would be Trump's ideal pick?
Very difficult to say. I'm not that deep in US politics that I could pick someone. But I mean, the US has a lot of talent in politics and in economy. And I hope that Donald Trump is smart enough to pick the right people.
I hope so. I hope he's not been captured. I'm not following him as close as I used to because I'm just disgusted by the US politics, even with his latest pick. But I want to talk, just to wrap things up, who is the counterpart to Janet Yellen right now? Who's her counterpart? In Germany?
It's ECB. It's the European Central Bank. So
that's right. And what's her name? Christine Lagarde, isn't it? It's Christine
Lagarde.
For those of you who don't have me on camera, I'm holding my head. I just was reminded of who Christine Lagarde is. She's the IMF or whatever. She was in some controversy in Paris. Doesn't it seem like the worse you do, the more you get promoted in this world for these people? So all I can say is about Christine Lagarde is she doesn't serve the people that she's supposed to. She got her promotion and she doesn't feel like she does it. Anyway, I'm going to stop there.
Isn't meanwhile Jerome Powell instead of Janet Yellen?
Janet Yellen is the Secretary of Treasury and Powell is the Fed. Fed chairman.
Okay, then
Christine Lagarde is.
So in Germany, it's Mr. Christian Lindner. He's from the Free Democrat Party. He's holding back money in a decent way to not let those left-wing parties go too far astray.
With printing money. That's all they want to do is print.
Yeah, but he certainly could do better.
Absolutely. And I just want to my whole thing is we can learn from Greece. We can learn from Spain and all these countries that are completely bankrupt. You know, Germany does not have a monarchy. I mean, Spain has something that the tourists can still come visit. We don't have a monarchy in the United States. If they do another quantitative easing, I mean, that's just it. We cannot afford to devalue the dollar even more because now we're facing off, and that's another podcast. We're facing off with the BRIC nations. Everyone is jumping onto the BRIC. And I am a pro-BRIC because I feel that it gives some kind of option. We can't continue to have this hegemony and for countries to be taken hostage, right?
Yeah.
Because we want, that's the same for Germany, because Germany has been taken hostage by the European Union. It's a very sad situation. I want to hear your optimism for the future of Germany and a couple of sentences to give some hopium to the audience and to the German listeners. Let's see, what are we going to have to look forward to for the future? Give us the best.
Let's go from a high level. And hoping that the entrepreneurial spirit sustains, that the German people will stand up and solve problems, that they will vote for a government that is capable to solve these problems, because there are people that are capable to solve the problem.
Absolutely. I nominate you.
They just need to get into office. And also looking at the industry we very much focused on, which is real estate and infrastructure. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of opportunities also. And I think once we manage to finance those opportunities, once we manage to attract capital from outside the country into the industries that Germany is strong with, and that can therefore put pressure also on political decision-making processes, then I'm very optimistic about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I am too. I love Germany. And when you spoke about Cologne, I remember visiting the big cathedral of Cologne. How does that coexist with gender-neutral bathroom? I don't know. The people who built that cathedral, who's so beautiful, where I spent a lot of time in prayer. Well, I don't think they were seeing what Cologne is currently offering. And again, I'm not trying to say that there's not a place in society for this, but it's not a priority in my opinion. But that said,
I agree 100%.
I mean, seriously, I feel like we're in a satire at the moment. Like it's a really bad episode of, between, going with these parades, and then we have these assassination attempts, and then it's constantly adrenaline driven. Like at this point, I'm just saying, I want no part of it. I'm not interested in it. I want normalcy back. Make normalcy great again, right? Make common sense great again, I say. So that said,
couldn't agree more.
Oh my goodness. People are going to be like, oh my God, she's become. No, I'm just being me. And this is my guest today, Thomas Roell, who is in Frankfurt, Germany. Thank you so much for being. And of course, put your comment down and let us know what you liked and didn't like about this conversation. If I'm over the top, no one can tell me to turn it down. Nobody can ever tell me to turn it down, because what you see is what you get. This is Frankly Speaking with Sendra D. Thomas, how can people reach you? And of course, you're welcome to come back, but how can people reach you if they want to continue the conversation based on anything that you talked about today? Give your email and your website.
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn, first of all, and you can reach me via email. Ideally, use my private email, Thomas with th.j.roell, Roell @gmail.com. And I'll reply as soon as possible. And it's been such a great pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much for taking the time and having me today. And let's look forward to the future.
The future. And of course, in my crystal ball, I see a very bright future for Germany. As a matter of fact, it's not even the future. Germany is bright now, and it continues. The beautiful Germany that we know is still there. We just have to get rid of the people who are dimming the light so that it can resurface again. It's never gone away. So those people, Olaf Scholz and Alonina, whatever her name is, a foreign minister, these people are a joke. They don't really serve anyone's interests except their own, their political agendas. And you know what? I have no doubt in my mind that you will continue to be a pillar and a beacon of industrial strength among your peers. So thank you again for another wonderful episode of Frankly Speaking with Sendra D. And do you agree with me, audience, that we should have Thomas back so we can do a part 2 on a lot of those mini topics that we talked about? But tell us, what would you like Thomas to touch on the next time? Startups more? Is it larger corporations, banks failing or succeeding? But it's been a pleasure as always. And I just want to know what you think. So put the comments below. Okay. Have a good day. Oh, and don't forget, subscribe to Frankly Speaking with Sendra D's podcast and join us every week as we uncover the stories of those who triumphed over life-altering challenges to achieve not just financial success, but a richer, a deeper, a more altruistic life. It's about time we redefine what it means to be a truly affluent individual. Don't you agree? So come and join me. And let's be unstoppable on this journey called life. Because here, affluence isn't just a buzzword. It's a path to waking up to your authentic being.